there is lots of contradictions. So Quran says that you can't kill, and then it says you can kill. Now what is it? Of course, it's a question that has to be confronted. It's a question that has to be clarified. Because of the time constraint that I have to now diligently adhere to, I have to now respond to this question in 5 minutes. You see, there is a law that the Almighty mentions in the Quran, which is applicable for all messengers. What the Quran calls Rasul. The Quran says that whenever the Almighty sent a Rasul, a messenger, to a certain nation, and the message was rejected by his nation, the nation that thus rejected the message had to receive divine chastisement, punishment in this very world, for others to learn a lesson from. This is a law which cannot be violated. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. This sunnat of Allah, this law of the Almighty, you would never find getting violated. If you would read the Quran, you would ask this question, and there are many people who ask this question as if they are complaining. There's a lot of repetition in the Quran. Okay, we know that Noah delivered the message, and then it got rejected, and then it was followed by a punishment. We got it. But why is it repeated over and over again? It is indeed repeated over and over again. I mean, the message is clear. He delivered the message, people rejected, and ultimately, sooner or later, after a very long time, there was a divine punishment that was inflicted upon them in the form of a huge flood that came. The reason why it has been repeated is that it was meant to warn a nation that was receiving yet another message from yet another messenger. And they were being warned and being reminded that, look, it is no joke. If you are going to reject it, be sure it's going to come to you as well. You will not be spared. You are no different. The same way as Noah's and other messengers' respective nations received divine punishment and they were exterminated, eliminated from this world, likewise is going to happen to you. So it had to be repeated. Because there were people for whom the fate had to be declared sooner or later, and they had to be warned. And that is why I say that it's something which was meant for a particular era. And you know what? The punishment was declared, people were warned, but no punishment came. So what was this whole idea about? Why were they being warned? You know, why am I trying to dramatize, sir? So that I am able to create this, at least a curiosity and questions. What exactly is the understanding that the Quran is giving? The punishment came. It came. The same way as it visited the people who rejected Noah. The same way punishment of the Almighty came to the people who rejected the message of Prophet Muhammad, God's mercy on him. However, punishments from God come in different forms. This time round, because the followers of the messenger were larger in number, this punishment came through the swords of the Prophet's companions. And this is exactly what the Quran mentions. It says, فَلَمْ تَقْتُلُوهُمْ. You did not kill them. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ. It was Allah, God, who killed them. Quran says, God is going to punish them through your hands. يُغْزِيهُمُ اللَّهُ بِأَيْدِيكُمْ. He is going to inflict punishment through your hands. And this is what the Quran mentions again and again. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that the verses which are talking about the fact that there are some people who are to be eliminated are the verses which are talking about a divine punishment which always gets inflicted during the times of the messengers and those punishments and those mentions have got no application whatsoever for any other times. Now, that is again, of course, that needs an understanding that needs to be appreciated from going through the text and critically examining the understanding which we have in the form of a popular verdict given by people. So, because this era specificity, or whatever be the word, I practiced it before speaking, but couldn't get it. It is era specific. It's something which was not acknowledged, and the end result was that there are some people who say that it's peaceful, and there are people who ask, how is it peaceful? I mean, it's mentioned in the Quran. Get hold of these polytheists and get rid of them wherever you find them. So people present that, there are various different contextual explanations. Now I'm just going to briefly summarize what I've said, and I'll just stop within time, inshallah. Islam is a message of peace meant for the entire mankind, for them to lead this life in accordance with the voice of their conscience and the divine law. It invites all humankind intelligently and peacefully to consider its message and decide whether their conscience inclines them to accept its claim of originating from God or not. However, the way Islam is presented by some Muslims, it appears neither reasonable nor peaceful. The reason why it has so become is that the message of Islam was expressed in the Quran and Sunnah, both of which were arranged to be fully preserved. However, the message was to be critically understood for it to be properly appreciated. Many Muslims chose to remain uncritical of what their tradition transmitted to them as religion. The less authentic form of religious information in the form of hadith, was given more significance, and the era-specific mentions in the Quran were considered to be universally applicable for all times, and they were all allowed. All the three problems that I've mentioned emerged and perpetuated because of three other factors, and that is the note where I would end. The three other factors are the principle of blindly following, acquiescing to what the elders have said has become a principle amongst many Muslims, which of course is wrong. Emotional and not intellectual approach towards understanding religion is popular, and the system of religious learning is actually causing this attitude to continue to be promoted, and therefore what we see are difficulties in understanding the original message that the Almighty intended to give to the mankind. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Khalid Zaheer, thank you, Jackie. Yes. See you soon again. Thank you very much indeed. For a really fascinating sort of a conversation and a self-critical look at Islam, which I can assure you that particularly non-Muslim colleagues here may find it sort of quite normal, taking it in stride to have this sort of approach to looking at whatever you're looking at. But I can assure you it is one thing which is quite new and still, I think, in its infancy as far as Islam is concerned. And that is why, in fact, I referred to the fact that Dr. Zaheer is going to be talking about the way he's looking at this revolutionary and rather courageous. And so one of some of the things that he himself referred to as era-specific or time-specific sort of elements, those things to be said in the way that he has said are quite rare, quite uncommon. So therefore, something I think pours food for thought. And one of the lines that I came across when I was doing just a little bit of a background info gathering about his profile on his website, I thought it was quite interesting from Imam Shafi. It probably sums up what he's trying to say to us, I think, quite well. And it goes as follows, and I quote, "I am convinced about the veracity of my opinions, but I do consider it likely that may turn out to be incorrect. Likewise, I am convinced about the incorrectness of the views different from mine, but I do conceive the possibility that they may turn out to be correct." it's a wonderful summarization, I think, of this sort of self-critical approach, which is having I think, an intellectual sort of approach as opposed to the emotional one, as you referred to it in your words, and just inherited from elders as opposed to looking at things in contemporaneous settings and seeing how they make sense in a different way or not, and how we can relate to them in modern day terms and so on. Fascinating. Certainly I found it very fascinating and living up to the title of the talk very well, thank you. And I think we've got about 45 minutes in which to now engage with discussion with Dr. Zaheer. And in the meantime, whilst your talk started, so we've been also joined by a very strong contingent from Awaz Radio, where you will be going shortly, Raki Khan, who's our chief presenter, and Mrs. Mughal, who is one of the directors on the board of directors of Awaz Radio, and Betty Abdelela, who is the managing director of Awaz Radio. And we're also joined, of course, in the company is Honorary Burgess, Raja Mirdad Khan, who's president of the Pakistan Forum, and many other colleagues as well, Mir Saab, Raja Zafar Saab, Ghalib Saab, and of course Sajid Ali, Ghalib and Sajid is the current chair and vice chairman of the Mass Committee. And my childhood friends, Barrister Latif Saab is here with me helping with setting out things along with Rana Sarfraz Saab. My friends and colleagues, and Mansoor also helped with all the arrangements. Thank you so much indeed, and all our colleagues who are here. It's really down to you now to make the most of this opportunity to explore the sorts of things, in addition to what Dr. Zaheer has mentioned. That was his selection, if you like, of where the internal contradictions may have come from, or may be the sorts of things, in his view, that can cause issues or problems in the minds of either Muslims themselves, some Muslims, or non-Muslims. But I know that there are others, Dr. Zaheer, there are other issues which come up in our experience in terms of living here as a multiracial society, multi-faith society, that come up from time to time when we are dealing with interfaith issues, issues of community cohesion. Things like, for example, wearing the hijab. You know, what is the status of wearing the hijab, how critically important that is, and so on. The attitudes that surround that particular practice. Women's position generally the position of women in Islam is another area which exercises the minds of our non-Muslim brothers and sisters and colleagues, etc. Sometimes with some justification, sometimes not so, but nevertheless, you know, it is an ongoing dialogue that we need to have. And related with the position of women is the question of whether or not women can lead prayers as an issue. It came up actually, my friend from Oxford, Azad Sab, would know from his experience. I think it was about a year ago, a visiting Muslim scholar from America to Oxford, a woman scholar from America, was asked to lead the prayers, and it caused quite an upset locally as well as nationally as a result of that. So quite a lot of sort of attitude, sort of hardened attitude bound up with that. There's also in the hands of some of our far-right extremist groups in this country, like the British National Party, and those sorts of people, the English Defence League. They do also their research on the Quran and our religion, and they come up with certain lines which they throw around in order to propagate the sorts of views they want to propagate. And they are very keen to pick up on one particular line which they quote as saying that, well, you know, the Quran tells Muslims that non-Muslims cannot be non-Muslims cannot be Muslims.
Chapter 51.
Right,
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Shiraz. So those are some of the other things that I'm sort of putting on the table, friends, brothers and sisters and colleagues. So there may be others in your mind. I think please do feel free, in my presence as an academic, quite accustomed to running free-ranging, thought experimenting sort of discussions. So do feel free to come out with all your prejudices and preconceived ideas and share them with us. That's the only way we're going to make progress and feel very ease with ourselves. And Dr. Greg Livingstone, who's in effect his own PhD, is in the area of Christian-Muslim relations, and has gone up. So first you.
Sure. Thank you very much. That was very good.
in light of the fact that Islam teaches there's no compulsion in religion, what would you say about the law of apostasy or the freedom of a Muslim to change his religion?
Right. You know, the word murtad or irtadad, which means apostasy, has been mentioned in the Quran on 3 or 4 occasions. And in none of those occasions there is a mention of a possibility of any punishment whatsoever in this worldly life. The only source where the punishment for apostasy as death has been mentioned is in hadith. So it's not from the Quran. Now I'm not saying that I reject what is mentioned in the